Looking Forward Our Way podcast addresses today's critical issues affecting adults in Ohio. We focus on issues that affect our money and our neighborhoods. Our expert guests are here to provide the information and resources needed to address those challenges. We are looking forward our way. Hi, this is Brett. We all remember where we were and what we were doing on September 11th, 2001. 9/11 became a pivotal turning point for all Americans. Most importantly, our American spirit shone through, helping each other through the crisis. You may also recall planes carrying thousands of passengers. They were diverted from American airports that day. 38 of the commercial planes and 4 military aircraft were diverted to the tiny Gander Airport on the island of Newfoundland, Canada. Nearly 6,600 individuals found themselves at the mercy of strangers in a town with a population of only 11,000. Our guest today is Shirley Brooks-Jones, one of the passengers. She's going to tell us her story and, most importantly, what she's accomplished to repay the kindness of our Canadian neighbors. As we approach the 25th anniversary of 9/11, we want to thank Shirley for being with us today and telling her amazing story. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's so good to see you, Shirley. Shirley and I were colleagues at Ohio State and knew each other way back when. And so glad that we ran into each other at the end of last year. And I convinced her she had to come in to talk to us and tell us her story. So thank you for your time and your efforts and willingness to come downtown on a really hot day and see us.
Well, it's really an honor to be here with the two of you.
Well, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So Shirley, we got a lot to cover. And I want to share with our audience a few of the accolades that you have received for your years of service that include creation of the Shirley Brooks-Jones Citizenship Award from Ohio State's College of Food, Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. You have an honorary graduate of the Lewisport Collegiate. You have a Medal of the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador, which you wore to show us today, and the Columbus Foundation's inaugural Acorn Award. And you are also portrayed in the Tony Award-nominated play Come From Away, which highlights this Canadian journey. So congratulations, kudos to all of these accolades. It's wonderful. So I wanted to make sure our audience knew that we were talking to Canadian royalty here today. So let's also give our audience a quick look at your time at Ohio State and how those skills that you built from being a young girl when you started at Ohio State were used to open new doors for these young students in Newfoundland.
Well, it was wonderful because I started out as a clerk stenographer, a civil service position, and then moved up the ladder to unclassified and eventually became a member of the senior administrative and professional staff, which I learned later the president was a member of that group. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. I only have a high school diploma. But anyway, 35 years on the staff at Ohio State. You know, the honor of being able to work with fantastic faculty and staff, and the students were absolutely awesome. One of the things that I truly treasured as well was my being able to work with students from other countries. Mm-hmm. We had students from all over the world, and just to interact with those people, to learn about their cultures and you know, all kinds of neat things. So, and then I got into fundraising just by accident. You know, I was never trained how to do that. I learned it by watching the man who was my quotes boss for a good number of years. He could pick up the telephone, needed money for this or that or the other. He could pick up the telephone and call somebody and say, hey, this judging team needs to go to Chicago or New York or wherever, and we don't have enough money to pay for that. Would you? And yeah, and it was amazing. So I watched him how he interacted with other people. And I used to be very shy, which I'm not nowadays. But as the university really got into fundraising a number of years later, of course, they worked with the people outside of the university, of course, the alums and so forth, but people with the big bucks and everything. So one day I was at a meeting and the president was going on and on about this, and I finally went up to him later and I said, what about the faculty and staff? They'd never thought about including the faculty and staff. So they established what they called the Campus Campaign Council. And that was just, to work with the faculty and staff. So I represented my college on that for a good number of years. And then for 5 years, strictly as a volunteer, after I retired, well, shortly before I retired and after I retired, I was the co-chairman of the Campus Campaign Council. And it was really fun, being able to work with people who really, our theme for Campus Campaign was always, I believe in Ohio State. And we did believe in Ohio State. And one of the things that really got me early on was one day we got a letter that was written by a woman who worked in the College of Medicine. She scrubbed the floors and the toilets and all that sort of stuff. She had written us a note on a piece of yellow lined paper like the kids use, And she had written to us and said, I do believe in Ohio State. She told us she had, I forget how many children, but a number of children. She was a single parent. But she believed in Ohio State. And even though she couldn't do much, she wanted to be involved. She put a dollar bill in there. And that brought me to tears. And even today, when I think about that woman, the widow's mite, so to speak, that really encouraged you. The other thing that was really fun, they had never really gone out to the branch campuses to involve the people there. And I said, we need to involve these people.
I can remember those campaigns.
Yeah. And Archie Griffin was one of the members of the Campus Campaign Council. And if I wanted to ensure that there would be a big audience, all I had to do was call Archie and say, hey, Archie, will you go with me? And he always did. And even the hospital, which they really had a tough time bringing people together to hospital. Hey, I remember when our boxer.
Oh, what was his name?
James. Oh yeah, that's terrible. Anyway,
we'll think of it.
We'll think of it. Anyway, we're sitting in a campus campaign meeting one day, and how could we get to the hospital? Okay, the person who was representing the hospital said, "Well,
Buster Douglas."
Right. Buster Douglas. He became one of my buddies too. Anyway, Buster Douglas had recently won the world championship. And so anyway, we found out Buster Douglas was born in University Hospital. And so anyway, they said, oh, well, we could do blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, let's do that. Okay, then they found out that Buster Douglas' mother was not married. And they said, we can't do that. I said, What does that have to do with it? I mean, his mother loved him. He loved his mother and all that sort of stuff. So when we had a meeting scheduled, I let them know Buster Douglas was going to be there. It was so big, they couldn't have it inside. They had it outside. All these people from the hospital area came from all these buildings. It was really great. One of my favorite pictures is Buster Douglas and me, and he's in this light-colored suit, and I'm looking up at him. He is really big.
Yeah.
Shirley, that what you were saying too, all these skills that you learned as a young girl,
yeah,
and as becoming a professional in literally public service.
Yes.
And this is one of the messages I always give to young people. Don't think that the only way to get a job is through private industry.
Yeah.
Government and higher education are wonderful career tracks.
Oh, they are, because you rub shoulders with so many people from so many different areas, and you learn. I mean, every person. Somebody asked me the other day about, I forget what the question was, but then I thought about, every person I have met in my life has become a part of me. Mm-hmm. And I love that.
That's right.
And to serve others. I mean, the things I do, I don't do them for money. I mean, when I give talks and all kinds of things, people say, how much do you charge to do this? I don't charge. I mean, this is my giving back for the good life that I have had, and it's wonderful to do that. And I find that you're far more successful. I mean, if I would say, okay, I want $150 or something, it turns out they would have given me a whole lot more. Right. So I just leave it up to the people. Right. What they want to give.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you were in Germany that September for an international conference. Suddenly your plane, Delta Airlines Flight 15, was diverted to Newfoundland. What were your first thoughts? I mean, you were there for the next 28 hours. You were stuck on the plane with the other passengers. Talk about the the myriad of feelings you and the others were experiencing.
Well, actually, I had been volunteering in France and Denmark as a part of I was a member of People to People International, which started in 1956. Actually, People to People International was started on September the 11th of 1956 by President Eisenhower. He felt like if we could just get to know other people on an individual basis, we'd stand a better chance for friendship. I like that. So I had been involved with People to People, and I was doing volunteering in France and Denmark. And then at the end, in Aalborg, Denmark, we had our board of directors meeting. I was on the board and also served as the corporate secretary. So I had been there. As I was making my plane reservations for all this travel and everything, one of my good friends, who was also on the board, lived in Florida with me. She called me one day and she said, "Hey, when we leave Denmark, could we fly to Frankfurt, Germany?" Her oldest granddaughter had taken a 2-year contract to serve as or to teach English as a second language to German bank executives. And it was the kid's first trip out of the country and so on and so forth. So her grandmother said, if we could stop overnight, have dinner with her. I said, that's fine. So we left Denmark on the 10th of September. We flew into to Frankfurt. We spent the night with the granddaughter, and I love telling people that kid didn't need 2 old white-haired ladies taking care of her. She was doing perfectly fine. So we had a nice evening with her. Get up the next morning, get on the plane to Atlanta, and then in Atlanta, she's going to change planes and go to Florida. I'm going to change planes, and at 6:30 that night, I'll be in Columbus. Well, that didn't happen. We got on the plane in Frankfurt, Germany. Everything was, just a regular flight, and I was tired. I was looking forward to getting home after being gone for about 3 weeks. So we get on the plane, we get settled in. About 4.5, 5 hours out from Frankfurt, the captain came on and told us he had an announcement. We had a slight problem with an indicator signal on our plane, and we were going to have to put down in Gander, Newfoundland, and take a look at it. He said, by the way, we're too heavy to land at Gander, so we're going to have to dump 30,000 pounds of fuel. And I'm thinking, ooh, I never liked math. Wonder how many gallons that is. And I thought, it has to be a whole bunch. So we circled and circled. We dumped the fuel. We came in for a landing at Gander. Now, the only thing I knew about Newfoundland was the fact that that's where the Titanic went down off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912. I was thinking about that. And then I was also thinking there in December of 1985, there was a chartered plane carrying the 101st Airborne from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, back, and they stopped in Gander to refuel, and when they took off, the plane went down, and it just ripped the belly out of the plane, killed everybody aboard the plane. It was really sad. That's the only thing I knew about Gander. So we landed, see all these planes sitting on the tarmac, and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? And then the captain came on. He apologized for the ruse, because he didn't want to frighten us while we were in the air. He said, actually, all the borders are closed. The airspace is now under control of the military. We're thinking, what happened? And so he told us that one of the Twin Towers had been hit, and then the second tower had been hit, the Pentagon had been hit, and something had happened outside of Pittsburgh. So what Captain Sweeney did, and he actually was one of my heroes, all during those 28 and a half hours we sat aboard our plane. He monitored the BBC to get whatever information he could get. So, but, the people on our plane, we never had any panic aboard our plane. Now, that was before a lot of people had cell phones, so there wasn't really much access or anything. A few people did have access, and they would either loan their phones, or they would take names and phone numbers for people to call and so forth. So everybody was looking out for everybody. And even though Delta is an American airline, we had passengers. We had 10 people from Ukraine aboard our plane who were headed to Columbus. Social workers who were going to be here for 3 weeks. We had a large group of students from India who were aboard our plane, headed to Ohio State, and people from other countries. So, we truly were an international flight. So, anyway, we sat there for 28 and a half hours.
On the plane?
On the plane, and we could, you could watch out the window to see what was going on. You wondered, what's happening. But everybody, and I tell everybody, I give Captain Sweeney the credit for how calm all of us were, because he didn't stay in the cockpit. He was out talking with the passengers, making sure that everybody was okay and everything. And the crew was absolutely awesome. If you looked at the faces of any of those crew members, you would never know that there was anything going on, but just a regular, So we really we were concerned, of course, and at one point, I was concerned about my husband and my sister who were going to meet me at the airport. And I thought, well, of course, I didn't have a cell phone. Well, my friend who was traveling with me was so funny. She said, oh, I have a cell phone. And so she's digging in her purse to find a cell phone. And she said, oh, I don't know if I even charged the battery. So we get on the cell phone, and I'm trying to reach my husband, and an operator comes on and tells me they know where we are. Now, where do I want to call? And so that was amazing, absolutely amazing. Got hold of my husband, told him, I said, oh, just want to let you know. He says, I know where you are. And I said, you do? He said, yeah. He says, you're in Newfoundland. Well, he had heard about the flights, being diverted, and he was on the way to the golf course. And he just went right to the airport. He stayed at Port Columbus, I should say John Glenn, but it was Port Columbus then. He stayed there hour after hour after hour. And actually, the Delta people at Port Columbus kept him advised of what was happening. And they also told him, when we finally got the word, days later, that you were going to leave, they changed the flight number from Delta 515 to a 4-digit number. And so when I talked with him, I told him, I said, they've changed the flight number. He says, oh, yeah, I know, I got it. So he was way ahead of me.
He knew more than you did, and you were in it.
He really did, yes. But it was not an unpleasant thing. Now, we didn't have food. We had snacks. We had plenty of water. But nobody was hungry, We also had a lot of little kids on our plane. Frankfurt had, there's a military complex there. So some of the people were military people with their children, heading back to the United States. And those little kids were so good. Nobody got upset. I mean, everybody was caring about everybody.
And you didn't even have a complete picture of what had happened.
No. And, as they were getting some information. Now, one of the things I did, too, once Captain Sweeney made the announcement that we were going to put down in Gander, I got up and I got my notebook out. And I thought, because I can't stand not to be busy, I got my notebook out and I started writing down the times that Captain Sweeney had told me certain things, the reaction of my fellow passengers and so forth. So I have a really good documentary of what happened from the time we were notified until the days later that I got home at 2:00 in the morning in Columbus.
So all of the folks that were on these planes then were dispersed into different areas of Canada. You were nicknamed the Plane People, which I thought was kind of cute.
Yes.
And so you ended up, after landing in Gander, then your groups were all split up among all those small towns and villages, and you were sent 30 miles. I mean, it wasn't next door.
Right.
This was 30 miles away to a little tiny fishing village called Lewisport.
Yes.
The Lions Club welcomed you, and you have an incredible story about the Lions Club. They took care of you for the 3 days that you were in Newfoundland, but tell us about Lewisport and that day of tragedy became a day of hope and endurance when you saw the Lions Club.
Let me back up just a little bit. The school bus drivers in central Newfoundland were on strike. And when they found out what had happened, they came from all their little tiny towns all around to the airport at Gander. And so as the people, it was the mayors of the little towns, the ministers, the service clubs, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the RCMP. They all got together to figure out what they could do with the plane people. So they all figured out how many people each of these little towns could take care of. So we get on the school bus
Let me just interrupt here a second. It's a logistics nightmare because they not only have to figure out where to send people,
Yes.
but they also had to end up figuring out how to make sure they got back.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, the school bus drivers was interesting because they were really going around and around, with the town, with Gander and so forth about it. And they just decided, hey, our fight's not with the plane people, our fight's with you. So they walked off of the picket lines and got into their buses and came to the airport and waited, to load up the people for each of the places. Now, there were 4 plane loads of people. About 700 of us, about 700 of the 7,000 people who were assigned to Lewisport and its environs. So anyway, now I've lost my train of thought. The Lions Club.
Yes.
Okay, so we get to Lewisport, and they pull up to this building, and I stepped off, and I looked up at the name of the building where I had been assigned. Now, let me go back. When I was a kid, lived in the short north here in Columbus, and was going to school, I was extremely nearsighted. I had no idea that wasn't the way you're supposed to see. I just, everything was blurry, so that was it. Well, the school nurse sent a note home to my folks and said, Shirley needs her eyes examined because she definitely needs glasses. Well, there wasn't any money for that. So the school nurse got in touch with the local Lions Club here in Columbus, Ohio, and it was those anonymous Lions all those years ago that made it possible for me to be sitting here talking with the two of you. Okay, so now go back with me. I step off of the bus in Lewisporte, Newfoundland. I look up at the building where I had been assigned. It was the Lewisport Lions Center. And I've always tried to keep my emotions inside because I didn't like to upset my brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of 9. And so, my little brothers and sisters, I didn't want to upset them. But the tears started just rolling down my face when I saw it was the Lions Center. And my friend who was walking with me said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "The Lions are still taking care of me." So we walk in, and you could smell the coffee brewing. You could smell the food being cooked in the kitchen. They had the tables all set up with white table in a U-shape, white tablecloths, flowers on the table, place settings, everything. They had actually, and of course, we had not seen any pictures, of what actually had happened. And I realized about days later when I got home that the pictures that I had formed in my head from what Captain Sweeney told us while we were sitting aboard the plane, those pictures were in black and white. When we stepped foot into the Lions Center, the first thing we saw was this teeny tiny little television screen up at the front of the room. We went roaring up to that. Now, we didn't have our luggage. We couldn't take our luggage with us at all. It was just our flight bags, so we didn't have much. So we stood there hour after hour after hour watching the scenes of what had happened in New York, what was happening. And it was like we were all numb. I was never afraid. I knew we were going to be okay. I just had that sense of, everything's going to be okay. But for that to happen, now, back on the plane, when Captain Sweeney told us that the plane had gone into the World Trade Center and all the borders were closed, the airspace is under control of the military, I'm thinking back, why would the borders be closed if a plane went into a building? Okay, I remembered when I was a little kid, 1945, there was one of our military planes went into the Empire State Building and killed a bunch of people. And so that was the thought that was in my mind. I'm thinking, but why would they close the borders? Then he went on and told us all the other stuff. But so many things, so many coincidences have happened. But those people took care of us. They had brought gym mats from the high school over, put them on the floor. They brought their towels, their washcloths, they brought their pillows, their blankets. They brought everything from their homes in for us, and they also had boxes of all kinds of toiletries. Razors for the men, shaving cream, toothpaste, toothbrushes, in the bathroom. In the bathrooms, of course, there were a lot of children. So they had diapers. They even had sanitary napkins and Tampax for the women. They had food for the little kids. They had toys for the little. They had literally thought of everything to help the plain people because we didn't have anything, and a lot of the people had actually packed their prescription medications in their checked luggage, so they had no access to their medications that they needed. So the local doctor, worked with those people, found out what their prescriptions were, and in some cases was actually able to reach their physicians wherever they happened to be to make sure. And then the local pharmacists filled those prescriptions, wouldn't charge anything. They wouldn't take any money for anything that they did. People would come in and say they were going to go out on their boat, on their fishing boat. Would you like to come along? And, other people, and everything was closed down in the towns except for the essential businesses. A couple of my favorite memories, I looked over at the corner of the Lions Center one day, and here sat a high school girl sitting on the floor. She's reading stories to all these little kids from our plane. They're gathered around her. It was so neat to watch that happen, And then another time, I looked over, and there was a little boy who came through the side door of the Lions Club, and he had a stuffed animal under one arm, and his security blanket in the other arm. He brought those in for the kids who were there and had no toys. I mean, and I think about those two so often, and I wish I'd found out their names, because I know with them doing the things at the ages they were, that they're still doing great things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even looking back 25 years, it's like it hits you in your heart. It's amazing.
It will forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the most extraordinary experience I have ever had in my life. And I tell a lot of people, out of the horror of all of that came some of the most beautiful experiences that many of us will ever, ever, ever experience.
Yeah.
So, but, at night, the women would come in and they would pick up the towels and washcloths that we had used. They'd take them home, wash them, dry them, bring them back. So we always had clean linens. I mean, it was amazing, just absolutely amazing.
Wow.
This is a story that's going to reverberate for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, your retirement took a sharp turn when you returned to Columbus. The citizens of Lewisport wouldn't accept any money for their support of hundreds of passengers they had housed during that time. You knew there was a way to make a difference if fellow passengers would open their wallets. For the past 25 years, you and your fellow passengers have provided educational funding for the young people of Lewisport. Talk about the creation of the Lewisporte Area Flight 15 Scholarship Fund, which is an endowed fund at the Columbus Foundation. It started at $15,000, now up to $2 million. Talk about the success and the impact the funding has had on those young people of the Lewisport area.
Well, it's been absolutely amazing. How it started, of course, is because they wouldn't take any money, and it bothered us because we knew they couldn't afford to do what they had done. I mean, everybody was helping us. It wasn't just the able-bodied. We had people with crutches and wheelchairs and everything else helping us. So we get back on the plane, and when we got up to cruising altitude, several of us got up and were talking with our fellow passengers because we'd all been, assigned to different locations, churches and schools and all that sort of thing. So I'm standing in the aisle with with several men, and we're talking about, what could we do? We knew we wanted to do something. How could we do something? And to me, the most important thing was to do something that would not offend the dignity of those wonderful people. I mean, we just couldn't do that. So this one fellow said, I learned that a lot of the kids drop out of school. And I said, why? And he said, no jobs. Okay, that took me back to Vinton County where I was born. And when I was 4, my parents moved to Columbus to find work. And so I could understand that, the fact of, no jobs. Okay. So we, then the fellow said, I was thinking if we could help 1 or 2 kids. And I'm thinking, I said, 1 or 2 after all these people have done for us? I said, why don't we start an endowed scholarship fund? And one guy said, what's an endowed scholarship fund? And I thought, well, gee whiz, I thought everybody'd know about endowed scholarship funds. So I simply explained, you don't spend the principal, you spend the earnings, and the principal keeps going and going. And so anyway, then another guy said, well, how will we do this? I said, we'll make up pledge sheets. Another guy says, what's on a pledge sheet? And when I talk to groups that have men involved, I love to say, it's probably because the men have their wives take care of things like that. That usually gets a laugh. But anyway, so I said, the guy said, how will we do that? So I'm ripping sheets of paper out of my notebook to make up these pledge sheets, just writing like crazy, name, address, telephone number, email address, however we can reach them, and how much they would like to pledge to this proposed scholarship fund. So, okay, that's fine. So then I look at the fellow who really triggered the idea in my head when he said the kids had dropped out of school. I looked at him and we're getting closer to Atlanta, by the way. And I'm thinking, once we get to Atlanta, we will have lost that opportunity because all these passengers are going to go off and they're going to be going different directions. So I said to the fellow who triggered the idea, why don't you go ask the flight attendant if she'll make an announcement? Because I knew she could use different languages for the different people who were aboard our plane. And that way, everybody would know what we were proposing. And I knew deep in my heart and soul that everybody would want to do something. And so he looked at no, he wasn't about to do that. And he told me, he says, that equipment is for official use only. I said, I know that, but I said, I think we should ask. And he said, well, they'll never allow it. I said, I still think we should ask. So anyway, he wasn't about to do it. I looked at the one guy, he's brushing imaginary crumbs off of the front of his shirt, and looked at the other guy, he's looking down at the floor. So I got the idea. They weren't going to do it. So I flew up to the front of the plane. The flight attendant is watching all of this. So anyway, I told her what we were about and asked her, if she would make an announcement. And she got all teary-eyed. And she said, and she, of course, as I said, they'd been so professional. She got all teary-eyed. And she said, this is wonderful, but I have to ask the captain. And I almost put a fist up in the air because I knew Captain Sweeney would allow us to do that. So she's back very shortly. And she said, the captain says this is great. And everybody in the cockpit had made a pledge to this proposed scholarship fund. It was just absolutely amazing. So I'm standing there, and I'm waiting for her to make the announcement, and she's not making an announcement. And I'm getting nervous because we're getting close to Atlanta. I'm getting really nervous. And so I said, aren't you going to make the announcement? And she said, no. And again, I like to tell people, I've had a lot of experiences during this time when I felt like I was in a Rod Serling Twilight Zone episode. And I looked at her and I said, why? And she said, because we feel it was a passenger's idea that a passenger should make the announcement. So I go flying back to the guys I had been talking with and the fella who triggered the idea. And I said, it's okay, but you got to make the announcement. He turned white as a sheet. No, he wasn't about to. So I looked at the second guy. He's still trying to brush crumbs off. The other guy's looking down at the floor. So I got the idea. So I said, okay, well, if you're nervous about it, I'll be glad to do it. It was like they rehearsed. They went, whew, would you really? So up I go. So the flight attendant, she's watching all of this. And I get up there and she says, so you're it, are you? I said, I guess so. So she pulls the jump seat down. Now, I've never been on a jump seat. I don't know how many people in the audience have been on jump seats, but those things wobble around. So, and she hands me the microphone. And she said, do you know how to use this? I didn't know how to use it. So she very briefly told me how to use it. So, okay, I sit down on the wobbly jump seat, and I got the microphone up to my mouth. All of a sudden, I went back to that shy, quiet person that I was years and years ago. I couldn't open my mouth. And so the flight attendant thought it was because I was nervous seeing the faces of my fellow passengers. That wasn't it. I was thinking about, she said, let me pull the food cart in front of you so you don't have to see their faces. That wasn't it. I was thinking about all of the teachers and the professors I had down through the years, all the reports I had to write, the papers I had to write. And, when you put something together, you got your introductory sentence, you have your conclusion, and the rest of it is no problem. That all comes together. So I had no introductory sentence. I told her, I said, I don't know how to begin this. Okay, now in another Rod Serling Twilight thing, she leans down to me and she said, how about, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I said, that's it. So I made my spiel, and all I want to do is get up there and get back to my seat and be anonymous. Well, those pledge sheets went through that plane like crazy, and we had pledges from I would say almost everybody on that plane, and of course we had the $15,000 was U.S., but we had a lot of pledges in other currencies as well. And so anyway, that's how it got started. So when I got back to Columbus, I went to the Columbus Foundation to see if they would work with me. Actually, I went to Ohio State first because I had, worked with a lot of fundraising. I knew I could just see how exciting it would be to bring some of these students from Newfoundland and 9/11 to Ohio State to study. I mean, I could see all kinds of opportunities there. They couldn't quite figure out, how to work this. So I went to the Columbus Foundation, not knowing if the foundation did anything out of the Central Ohio area. They embraced this story with everything they had, and so they worked with me on. I mean, I knew what I wanted the scholarship to do, and I knew, how we had all the pledges and everything. They were absolutely amazing. They did all of the legal work. They did all of the other stuff that needed to be. I could never have afforded to hire attorneys and all those other kinds of things. The foundation is a true, oh my gosh, we are so fortunate. So anyway, now the foundation can make grants anywhere, in the country, but they can't, to other countries. So what they did was they got in touch. It's a long story, but we went to different organizations to see if they would handle this for us. But the Columbus Foundation was the one. Okay, so to actually get the money into Newfoundland, the woman I worked with at the Columbus Foundation was a member of the Downtown Rotary Club. She went to the president of the Rotary Club, told him the story, and it turned out I had known that man for years and years. I had no idea he was a Rotarian. But so what happens now with the scholarship, the money, the contributions go into the Columbus Foundation. Once the school notifies the Columbus Foundation, the kids who are qualified for it, and the foundation does its work, then they notify the Downtown Columbus Rotary Foundation, and they're the ones who actually cut the checks and send them to the different schools and universities and all that sort of stuff. So there again, you've got service, one organization working with another organization,
right.
Everything. But anyway, the way I wanted the scholarship to work was because all the people were helping, and all the kids were helping, and to make sure that these kids had an opportunity. I wanted them to be able to go to any accredited college or university anywhere in the world that they chose, or any post-high school vocational or technical training program, because the trades are truly important in our world. Okay, so I set it up so that every kid in the graduating class who met the criteria that we set up, the guidelines, so to speak, to have this scholarship, all they had to do was to have an 85% average for the 3 years that they attended Lewisport Collegiate. Now, Lewisport has about 14 outport villages that feed into it for different things. Most of these kids the kids in those outports go to school the first 9 years in their little town. The last 3 years, they have to come into Lewisport to attend the high school there. They call it Lewisport Collegiate. Okay, so if they could have an 85% for the 3 years that they were at Lewisport, they had to be a volunteer in something. Okay, they had to write a 100-word essay about why they wanted it, and that's all they had to do. Now, so then whatever interest we have each year, we divide it equally among the kids who qualify. Now, so that means the scholarships are small, but that doesn't matter to them. I mean, early on, some people said, why don't you limit the number that you give each year? I didn't want to do that because it reminded me so much of Vinton County, where I came from, and the opportunities that simply were not there for people who had so little and everything. So anyway, the largest graduating class that they've ever had during the time that I've been involved with this, was 100 students. So that's not bad. Now, and each year I should have brought a list of the years and the number of scholarships that are received, but the highest we gave several years were like 28 scholarships. But these kids and their families are so happy to be recognized in that way. And I figure if they have a little bit to get them started, then there's always going to be other funds that will jump in, so forth. And it's made a big difference. Now, a couple of things that really make me happy. The first year we presented the scholarship was in 2002, the very next year. Okay, one of the girls in that first class, after she completed her undergraduate degree at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is the provincial capital, she went on to get a master's in chemistry and a master's in physics, and that hurts my head because math and science is not my thing. But then she went on to get her MD. And about 6 weeks before I was up there, she was named the chief of staff for all of the hospitals in that whole area. And these kids, they're going out, and once they finish their formal education, they go back to their own little communities, and they're making a difference. And it just makes me so happy to know. And then, as the years went on, and of course I was giving a lot of talks and doing all kinds of things, I was really getting tired. And I kept thinking, geez, I wonder how much longer I could keep this up. Well, my friend in Florida, who was one of my biggest supporters, she said, Shirley, this is over with. You need to stop. I said, Joe, this is never going to be over with. It's going to continue. Okay, so every time that I would get kind of tired and think I can't keep going, I'd go back in my head to one particular graduation. Now, I attended most of the graduations for a good number of years. Didn't know who the scholarship recipients were going to be. They didn't know either until their names were called, which was really a nice surprise. But I went back in my mind to this one particular graduation ceremony. There was a set of twins, this good-looking boy and girl. Okay. And they were they're the greatest kids. They really are. So after that particular graduation, after all the graduation, the parents and the grandparents would come up and thank me, and and really emotional, because I don't really figure I did that much, but it's making a difference in so many lives. And this one particular graduation, after when the twins received their scholarship, I'm surrounded by a bunch of people. Off to the right was this elderly man. I knew he wanted to talk with me, but they're not pushy people. So he waited until it cleared out. Finally, he came up. He introduced himself. He had the same last name as the twins. So I said, "Oh, are you related to the twins?" He started to cry, and he said, "They're my grandchildren." He said, "Shirley, you have no idea what you mean to my family." And I couldn't believe it. I was just absolutely, it made me. So I would think about that man and how emotional he got over that little thing that I was able to do. Mm-hmm. So I would think about him, all the time. Well, a number of years later, I was back, for another graduation, and before went to all the ceremonies and everything, the couple that I stay with, Bill and Thelma Hooper. Bill was the mayor of Lewisport, and his wife Thelma. They've become my fifth brother and my fifth sister. Okay, we talk on the phone all the time. But anyway, Bill, Thelma, and I had gone out to lunch before all the ceremonies were going to happen up at the school, and there was a group of ladies who came in, sat across the table or across the room in this restaurant where we were. And you know how you're sort of drawn to some people? I was kind of drawn to this really lovely lady, and pretty soon she got up from her chair and she came over and she spoke to Bill and Thelma. Of course, everybody knows everybody up there because it's a small town. And she looked at me and she said, "You're Shirley Brooks-Jones, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "I want to thank you. 3 of my children have received your scholarship." And I looked at her and I said, "Are you the mother of the twins?" She was. And there was just a resemblance, And I said, "What are they doing?" Well, the youngest one was still in college in St. John's. The girl was now teaching. The boy was working on his PhD in geophysics, and I'm thinking, whoa, that's heavy. What's geophysics? But, I love going back. I've been back 30 times, and in September, I'll be going back for the 25th anniversary. That'll make my 31st trip.
So we have to give a huge shout out to the Columbus Foundation, which is one of my favorite groups of people and favorite organizations. There is nothing that they do that's not excellent. It's excellent.
Awesome.
So I was in contact with them this week and told them we were going to be talking. And they said, now, Shirley's really the expert, but our paperwork says as of last school year, there have been 434 scholarships given.
Okay, and with this year's, it's 461.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
They told me, Shirley will know for sure. So 461 scholarships for young folks.
Yes.
Just out of a 3-day ordeal of watching over all the plain people.
Yes.
That is a legacy.
Yeah.
That is a true legacy. Before we started our taping here, Shirley was telling Brett all about our mutual friend, Randy Adams, my Otterbein classmate, who is a Broadway show producer in New York City and who produced the program Come From Away, which features the plain people. And Shirley's kind of stuck in there someplace. That story revolves around that generosity and respect at a time when such destructive acts took nearly 3,000 innocent lives. How does the courage and the goodness of your Canadian hosts live on 25 years later, even in today's chaotic world?
It's amazing because they're what, I wish President Eisenhower were alive. He would be all over this. But it's the goodness of people. And, when people ask me, they were kind. They didn't know us. They probably would never see any of us again. And yet they were so emotionally involved. They really, truly cared. And there were people who had so little, but yet gave everything they had, and it just, it makes me feel good. I've felt from the time I was a little kid that there are more good people than bad people in the world. And with all the horrible things that have happened in the past and are happening today, I still maintain that there are more good people in the world. And we need to look at the positive things instead of the negative things that keep trying to tear us down and tear us apart.
Well, and we said that the whole scholarship program is your legacy, but in actuality, it's things like that have maintained the goodness because you have been able to give back to those kids. Now they are giving back. They're paying forward.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I was really shocked. I mean, so many things that are coincidental or serendipity or whatever you want to call it. In 2007, on December the 7th of 2007, of course, that's kind of a date that's important in our history. I was presented with the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador, which is the highest honor that they give their citizens. And they told me that I was the first non-Newfoundlander ever to receive it. And I was just shocked. I really was. I didn't hear a word the premier was saying. I didn't hear a thing, But anyway, after the ceremony was over with, a woman came up to me and she congratulated me and she said, "Did you hear the clock chime while you were receiving your award?" And I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't hear a thing." And she said it chimed 7 times or 11 times. And I thought, that's interesting. Why is she telling me that? She said, "Do you realize you were the 9th person to receive the order? So there you go, 9/11. Isn't that interesting? I mean, that's another Rod Serling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then 2 years later, in February of 2009, I was invited up for an event that they were having in St. John's. Very small gathering. Prince Charles and Camilla were doing an 11-day tour across Canada. And Newfoundland was their first stop. And so they invited me to come to St. John's, to meet with Prince Charles and Camilla. I thought, oh my goodness. So I went and so when I called to find out what the protocol was, they told me it was fairly simple, but they said, make sure you wear the order. So, I show up, I've got the order hanging around my neck, and it's kind of hard to see. Charles spent about 15 minutes with me, just the two of us, just standing in this room talking with one another, And at one point he said, and what is that? As he looked at the order. And I said, it's the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Let's explain. The order is a medal.
Yes.
It's like an Olympic medal.
It's actually, and it's really neat because
beautiful.
The provincial flower of Newfoundland is the pitcher plant. So the shape of it is a stylized pitcher plant. The stones in it are made of labradorite, which is their provincial mineral. Then it has the coat of arms that show the people came from Ireland and Scotland, and of course the Queen's crown. But anyway, it's a beautiful, heavy gold medal that is just, I was just thrilled. So he wanted to know what it was, and I told him it was the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador. And he said, oh, well, I did check about the protocol, and they said, fairly simple, but make sure you wear the order. Okay. So when he spotted it, he said, and what is that? And I said, it's the Order of Newfoundland and Labrador. He said, and why do you have it? And I said, it's for the work I did following 9/11. He said, oh, you're the American woman. You're the American. Oh, you're the American woman. And I have never been more proud to be an American, to have the future King of England talking to me like that. So we're talking. It's just regular stuff, and he was fun and funny, and he said something funny, and I reached out and slapped him on the arm, and I thought, oh man, you should not have done that. That really is a good.
The Order of Newfoundland will be with you in the jail in London.
Well, and I thought, he reminded me of one of my little brothers. He really did. It's just my little brother. So what the heck? But anyway, then I spotted this guy who was standing way behind him. I was being glared. There was a glare. So I mouthed the words, I'm sorry. But I really wasn't. And it didn't bother Charles because he kept asking. He wanted to know how many kids had received the scholarship, where were they going to school, what were they studying. It was really neat.
That's
and
wonderful.
Then when I met with Camilla, because she was in a different area, she spotted the order and she says, is that labradorite? And I said, yes, it is. Well, she had a couple little bracelets on her wrists, and she's twisting them, looking up at me and everything. She said, I have labrador. She's trying to find the labradorite in her bracelet. And I'm thinking, it's just one human being to another. Yeah.
Which this whole thing was.
Yeah.
Human beings taking care of other human beings.
Absolutely. But now I've one of the good friends I've made throughout all of this is a man who was born in Canada, but he lives up in Lakewood, Ohio at this point. And so he got in touch with me shortly after 9/11, and we've followed each other, and we visit back and forth and everything. Well, he was just absolutely thrilled with this situation with Prince Charles and everything. So he took it upon himself to write King Charles earlier this year to tell King Charles to remind King Charles of the meeting that the two of us had together. And also the fact that I'm going to be 90 years old on August the 28th. And he was requesting that the king send me a message for my birthday. And had I known that, I would have croaked. What he told me, oh my gosh. So he came down about a month ago and he said, I have a letter for you. It's addressed to me, but it's really for you. Well, it was from the head of the king's correspondence. It was from Buckingham Palace, thanking him for his letter and expressing His Majesty's best wishes to Shirley and thanking her for her work and this and that. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what else is going to happen?
There you go.
Anyway.
Wow. Well, you're an example of how older adults can carry on great work, utilize their strengths and skills to make our world a better place. I'm going to wrap this up into some words of wisdom too, if you can. So what advice do you have for those who are thinking about retiring or have recently retired? How do they continue to be fulfilled and transition their passions into new goals and endeavors?
Oh, there's so many things that seniors could do. I mean, just ask your friends or your former coworkers or whatever. I mean, join service clubs. I mean, the Lions Club or Rotary or Kiwanis or something like that. And there's so many organizations that help others. Just get involved. I mean, don't be shy. Just call or go to a meeting or something and find out how you can. And, you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it. You could just do a little bit here, a little bit there. There's lots of things that can be done. And the feelings that you get from doing those things really energize you. I mean, as I said, I'm going to be 90 years old. I can't, other than my body falling apart, I can't believe I'm going to be that age because I'm having such a great time doing all kinds of things, meeting all kinds of wonderful people.
Traveling the world. Shirley, thank you. This was wonderful. It was so good to see you, and hopefully we'll have lunch again soon.
We'll do that. We ought to have Randy.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, Randy will be in Columbus in September, so we'll try to get him to have lunch with us.
Oh, wonderful. Well, and back to the musical about Come From Away. One of the things that really tickles me is I'm one of the characters in that. Now, there are only 12 actors, but each one of them have 4 or 5 different roles to play. And so I'm one of the roles that this particular actor plays. On Broadway in the North American cast, I was portrayed by James Earl Jones II. And James and I have become good friends. We text back and forth and telephone each other.
And he's a nephew? Is that right?
He's the nephew of James Earl. Yeah, because I thought they were sons, but they were cousins. Oh. And oh my God, what a talented man. And each cast, no matter which cast, it's always a young African-American male. And we always get together, and it's wonderful. Really neat. Really neat.
Thank you so much for being here and telling us this story. I don't think people realize that Come From Away, especially if they haven't seen the play, what is involved, but that you're here from Columbus. I mean, it's important to see that we had a huge part in this.
Well, and another really interesting thing that happened too. One of our OSU graduates was a zookeeper. She was accompanying 2 bonobos. One bonobo was coming to the Columbus Zoo. The other one was going to a zoo in Wisconsin. And so, she's worried about these bonobos. They're in the bellies of the plane. There were animals in the bellies of these planes. And one of the women in Gander got permission to go in so they could take care of those animals and everything. So it wasn't just the people; it was the animals as well.
Wow! And that's
so just so many wonderful.
Shout out to all of those folks.
Oh, wonderful! Well, it's been an honor to be here with you. So
thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and many thanks to our expert guest, Shirley Brooks-Jones, activist extraordinaire, for joining us today.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed by the experts interviewed on this podcast are their own and don't necessarily reflect the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. The information provided in these interviews is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals for specific advice or information related to their individual circumstances. The podcast host and producers don't endorse or guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of any information provided by the experts interviewed. Listener discretion is advised.